Hey, well, let's go ahead and get going. We have a lot of information to get through tonight. We're really excited to share with you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second virtual public meeting for the Walker Property Visioning process. My name is Amy Bell. I'm a landscape architect with Groundwork Studio, and I'm here with Christina Sandoval, the project manager, and David Flores, Deputy Director with the city's Parks and Recreation Department. And they'll be available to assist in answering questions later on at the end of the presentation. I'm also here with Kelly and Ted from Groundwork Studio, who are helping with the technical side of things. And we have two amazing interpreters, Sandra and Denise as well, and we appreciate them being with us tonight. So in tonight's presentation, we will be providing an overview of the results of the visioning process and a review of the next steps for the project, including how you all can continue to stay involved. If you would like to access the Spanish interpretation, please follow the instructions on the screen and in the chat. A few housekeeping items. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the project website. If you have questions or comments at any time during the presentation, please type them into the chat bar. We will address questions in the order that they were received at the end of the presentation. If for any reason we cannot get to all the questions within the time allowed, we will post answers on the website within 5 days of this presentation. Okay, so let's go ahead here. This project was designed to help the City of Albuquerque Parks and Recreation Department develop a community-based vision for the redevelopment of the Walker property, which is what we are currently calling the vacant lot just north of the Wells Park Community Center. The name will eventually be changed and formalized. The visioning process was intended to develop an understanding of what the community views as appropriate and inappropriate uses on the site in order to inform the redevelopment master planning process. For additional information on project background, please visit the project website, which is in the chat, or it's on the screen here too, bit.ly/Walker property. You can also watch the recording of the first public meeting there at the website, which provides details on the site history as well as relevant planning and zoning information. Here we see a timeline for the project activities. We started back in July with the creation of a project website and steering committee who has since met monthly. Activities included a survey, a giant chalkboard installation, virtual public meeting, and 5 focus groups. We are currently in the final stages of the visioning process and are really excited to share with you all of what we have heard from the community. Before we get into the results of the visioning process, we'd like to explain the transition between visioning, where we are now, and how this information will be used to inform the master planning and design for the site redevelopment. The visioning process is a listening process. Through these different activities, it was our goal to hear your priorities, your desires, as well as your concerns regarding how the property will be redeveloped. We are now moving into a phase of analysis and balance to take all of the great ideas that we've heard, understand how they relate, check them against constraints, whether those constraints are spatial, regulatory, operational, budgetary, or otherwise. We will also be exploring opportunities for partnerships and community capacity building to give the project its best chance for long-term success. Once the vision is run through this process, we can finally begin in earnest to begin master planning and design, in which your continued participation is key. We can think of it sort of like if I were planning my dream vacation, pre-COVID, of course, say a month in Hawaii or some other faraway tropical paradise. Instead, based on what I can afford and time I can take away from work, I can plan a week's trip to South Padre Island. It's not my dream vacation, but it's within reach, and we're going to have a great time anyway. So again, a summary of the activities completed as a part of the visioning process. I want to say here that we had really hoped to do more of this in person, and we really look forward to the opportunity to have more in-person gatherings in the coming year. It's been a challenging year for everyone, and we are really grateful for your patience and continued participation despite evolving and changing restrictions due to public health considerations. The project website housed our online surveys, email sign up, and I think we've collected something like 200 emails for project updates, which is great, and project progress updates. The website will continue to serve as a location with updated project information and answers to frequently asked questions as we move forward into the next phase of the project planning process. The steering committee has met monthly and has provided valuable oversight and direction for the visioning process, and will continue to do so. On October 17th, with the help of ACE Leadership High School, we installed the giant chalkboard to collect feedback over the following 3 weeks. Our first public meeting was held October 20th, and as I mentioned, the recording is available on the project website. We also conducted 5 focus groups over video conference with youth, seniors, artists, neighbors, and business owners. In our steering committee meetings, we have had active participation from a number of community organizations and stakeholder groups, such as the Wells Park Neighborhood Association, the Harwood Arts Center, several local businesses, as well as robust involvement from a diversity of city departments. The purpose of the steering committee has been to provide guidance and oversight for the visioning process, to invite as much participation as possible and engage in accurate representation of the community. The high level of city coordination has been key in order to begin to understand how to balance vision with allowable uses according to city codes and ordinances and procedures, and how to identify future interdepartmental collaboration in support of the project. So we really are grateful for this level of city participation and interest. Our team's process began with an in-depth study of the demographic history of the Wells Park neighborhood so we could understand the context for the project and strategize how to best connect with an accurate representation of the community. We also studied the area history, the stories of Wells Park neighborhood people and place. I'm not going to go into the detail of that history now. It's available on the website and in the previous public meeting, but it's clear that as one of Albuquerque's oldest neighborhoods, the history of people and place in Wells Park is multi-layered and deep. We also had the opportunity to connect with Martha Hurd and read through all the transcripts of her amazing oral histories, so many fascinating stories that connect Wells Park to the broader development of Albuquerque and the region. Additionally, we spoke with Juliana Kerwin and studied the stories shared as part of the banners on Mountain Road and the neighborhood's Cordell project, which involved sharing short stories at a local cafe. Through this research, we identified a number of historically relevant activities associated with memories of the neighborhood and Wells Park Community Center site. We did this because it's important to consider that one way of telling the story of Wells Park could be to include some of these historic uses in the Walker property redevelopment, whether it's youth programming, a dance hall, a pool, or agriculture. Now we'd like to share what we heard in the responses to the priorities and uses survey, which hopefully all or most of you had the chance to respond to. We received 196 total survey responses, 150 of those online, and 46 hard copy mailers. It's important to note that we were only able to collect demographic information as part of the online survey. We just simply did not have room on the hard copies. Also important to note is that the survey is not what we call statistically significant, and it really only represents one piece of the broader visioning process, as you saw from the list of all the engagement activities that we had previously. So here we see that a full 3/4 of the survey responses came from Wells Park and downtown neighborhoods, which shows how interested and engaged this community is in the project, and that the feedback we've received is reflective of mostly local residents who live closest to the project site. The participation from other neighborhoods is interesting in that it does show that the project is important to people in other parts of the city as well. Perhaps many of these people work or otherwise spend time in Wells Park or downtown, or maybe lived in Wells Park at some point. We had a fairly good distribution of participation from different age groups. The lower number of participants under the age of 30 tells us that we might need to reach out more specifically to this group as the project moves forward. The majority of responses said that they speak English as the primary language at home. Majority of responses identified as white, which is not necessarily aligned with what we understand to be the demographics of the Wells Park neighborhood. So this is an area where we may also consider how to specifically reach out to less represented groups as the project moves forward. Most of the survey respondents live in houses with less than 5 people, but a full quarter said they live in a multi-generational household. This is an important consideration when we start to look at how the redevelopment of the Walker property can support multi-generational use and interaction between different age groups. Our first survey question asked for a ranking of priorities for the site, with 1 as the top priority and 5 as the lowest. Please note that as you read this chart, the items with the lower number received 1, or the top priority, were more frequently selected than those with the longer bars. So what we see here is that local economic development was selected as a top priority more than the other priorities, with safety and community building not too far behind. Our key takeaway here is that each of these priorities appears to be important to the community. The difference between them is really not that great. And these priorities are not mutually exclusive. So it would be possible for the redevelopment of the Walker property to achieve all of these goals. And in fact, I think by looking at these answers, we hear this as direction from the community to do just that. Moving to the second question in the survey, something interesting to note here is that the ranking of priorities is somewhat of an inverse of what we saw in the requested uses, where recreation and public art were lower on the priority ranking. Recreational facilities and public art installations were the most frequently selected uses. Large and small gathering space, along with temporary commercial facilities, which does support the local economic development priority, were the next popular, with ecological and educational installations not far behind. Indoor recreation and permanent commercial were less popular, with housing and cooperative facilities as the least selected. We want to emphasize that the results of this survey may or may not directly inform what uses are included in the redevelopment, and it is likely that we will see a combination of many of these uses. As we mentioned previously, there are a lot of considerations and constraints which will affect which uses or which combination of uses will be feasible. We are not in a place in the planning process where we can say whether any of these uses will be included for sure or will be thrown out. But I think that the great thing is here, this survey tells us, that the level of acceptability that these different uses bring along with them. We have a lot more work to do before we make that determination. So next, we'll review the feedback that we received on the giant chalkboard. Again, with special thanks to ACE Leadership High School for helping us construct it. We installed the board on October 17th and had a COVID-safe event where people came to write their vision on the board. The board stayed up and collected additional responses, which we documented for the next 3 weeks. We took all of the comments on the chalkboard and put them into a spreadsheet from which we created this word cloud, where the larger words that you see are the ones that we documented or recorded more frequently. So we can see that an outdoor area or park with trees and art that is family friendly and safe were really popular responses on the chalkboard. They were things that were written more frequently. And we also see that a lot of other ideas were written on the chalkboard as well. Next, I'd like to review some summaries from the focus groups. For our first focus group with youth, we met virtually with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in their civics class with Albuquerque Sign Language Academy. The academy is currently located just a couple blocks south of the Walker property off of Lomas, and prior to COVID, class groups would meet at Wells Park for some activities, so most of the students were familiar with the site. The first meeting that we had with the class was a presentation of the project and a discussion about what community engagement is and why it's important. And during the second meeting, students built their vision for the property with the loose part kit that was sent out to them. We had 12 participants and saw some key themes repeated in the students' creations. Almost all of the students expressed the desire to have a place for people their age to hang out, like a sort of living room. And many students suggested some kind of retail or market with a lot of requests for a cafe. Many students also suggested interactive rotating art exhibits. Then on November 4th, we held our virtual focus group with Wells Park area business owners. We had 6 participants. At the beginning of each of the rest of the focus groups, we shared preliminary survey results to provide some context and check in with the group to see if those results were resonating, if they made sense. And for the remainder of the focus group, we asked participants to use a piece of paper they had lying around at home to draw a picture, fold, tear, or write words to describe their answers to 2 questions. The questions we asked the business group were: 1, what does your business need to do well in Wells Park? And 2, what is your vision for the redevelopment of the Walker property? So common themes included the need to activate the space to make it safe, with discussion about potentially capturing the population of people who drive past the site on their daily commute in and out of downtown. Business owners discussed the importance of creating a place that is primarily for residents, but is also attractive to visitors, with the understanding that visitors often seek out places where they can have fun and get to know a place without feeling like a tourist. Several uses, including commercial, housing, and agriculture, were proposed and discussed. For the seniors focus group, we only had 4 participants, but it was a very robust conversation with many good ideas. Questions asked of these participants were: 1, what is your favorite memory in Wells Park? And 2, what is your vision for the redevelopment of the Walker property? A main theme of how food is a way to bring people together came out of the memory conversation. And I'm sure many of you can relate. So many of our memories are connected to food and who we share it with. Additionally, the group emphasized the need for a place to share knowledge across generations, from elders to youth and vice versa. Also, the importance of accessibility and easy access to exercise outdoors were discussed. That same afternoon, we held another virtual focus group with Wells Park neighbors, residents, and we had 6 participants. The questions asked of this group were the same as with the seniors group: what it was their favorite memory and vision for the redevelopment. This group recognized the great diversity and sheer quantity of things requested by the community. This raised an important point that while the Walker property redevelopment may be able to address many of the things requested by the community, it will likely not be able to capture all of them. And with that in mind, this process is a really valuable one for the neighborhood association and for the city to understand what other development may be needed in the community in other locations and the future to meet these these requested needs. Neighbors also discussed the importance of multifunctional, flexible space to keep the space active and safe and to meet many needs at the same time. This group talked about how much they enjoy meeting neighbors and friends and the need to have a place like a front porch for the community to be together. Our final focus group was with Wells Park area artists, and we had 7 participants. This group was asked, how can art tell the story of Wells Park, and how their own art and/or creative process could be a part of the vision for the Walker property redevelopment. The group emphasized the ability of art, whether it's visual, performance, culinary, digital, or otherwise, to tell stories and connect people to place. They also made several suggestions for how to integrate artwork into the infrastructure of the park, whether it's through play equipment, gathering spaces, stage, and similar to the student group, the artist group discussed the opportunity for evolution and adaptation of the role of art within the space over time, and encouraging people who visit the park to actively participate in art and creativity. Before we get into our preliminary synthesis of all of this feedback, I want to briefly revisit the different ownership and management scenarios for the site. When we try to understand how all of these different ideas for the property could play out, it's helpful to remember that the property could be city-owned and managed, city-owned and privately managed, or come under partial or full private ownership and management. These different scenarios support different combinations of uses and all have some level of pros and cons. Evaluation of these models will be an important part of our next analysis and balancing phase we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. In our review of the survey responses, chalkboard feedback, and focus group conversations, we began to see 4 major themes emerge in food, local economy, art and culture, and nature and recreation. We recognize that many of the proposed uses overlap between multiple categories and are using this graphic to try to better understand which uses achieve multiple of these goals. For example, food trucks and market support the local economy, food, and potentially also art and culture, which makes this particular use attractive because multiple priorities, multiple goals are met. Please note that this graphic only shows overlap in themes and does not show uses in relation to how often they were requested. Because we understand safety is a high priority for the project, we're starting to evaluate which uses and which combinations of uses will activate the space or provide eyes on the space throughout the day. So we're looking at this timeline both for weekdays and for weekends. We see some uses only create activity for certain times of the day, like classes, multi-use courts, or performances, while other uses like permanent retail or restaurant, housing, or small business offices create activity and presence all day. We can see here that it's a little easier to have activity on the site on weekends than it is on weekdays, but that strategic combination of uses does provide activation all day long. We also see that there are very few uses besides housing that would keep the space active at nighttime. And we understand that there are very valid concerns about security, questions about fencing, and these are going to be really important issues that we're going to be working with as the project moves forward. But again, decisions about how exactly that's going to be handled have not been made yet. So what are the next steps for the project now that the visioning process is nearly complete? As you can see, we're really at the very early stages of the project, and there is a lot of work to do and a lot of ways that you can continue to be involved. We constructed this diagram to present all of the next steps in terms of funding, planning, design, and construction, and community participation. If we look at the track of funding for the project, we know that $4 million was requested for the project back in October of this year as part of the proposed general obligation bond package. Council will act on that package in April, May of 2021, and in November, the public will vote on it in the municipal election. So a very important way that you can be involved. If the bond passes, those funds would become available in 2022. So we can see clearly here that the city is invested in this project and that the timeline for funding aligns with the timing for when funds would be needed to support the progression of the project. In terms of planning, design, and construction, we are now transitioning from vision to the master planning process, which will take several months. The project will then transition to schematic design and shovel-ready construction documents, bidding, and eventual construction. If it is determined that there should be a public-private partnership to develop the property, RFPs, requests for proposals, would be issued to developers as the master planning process is completed. And please remember that if this is the direction that the project goes, the public would have a chance to weigh in on and review any kind of development agreement within the metropolitan redevelopment area, which would apply to this project. As we move into master planning, you will have many more chances to review proposed options and plans and provide feedback. The project website will continue to be updated with project progress and information, and several more public meetings will be held. In addition, and this is really exciting, a unique aspect of this project, the city intends to support a series of monthly, temporary, or pop-up events out on the site, ranging from exercise classes to food truck days, maybe for drive-in movies, art festivals, or other larger events. These events are intended to both test different potential uses at the site and also allow us to understand how the site is accessed and used. So again, we want to remind everyone how we transition from this listening process to planning and design. We have much to consider with different combinations of uses. For example, how much parking will be required, or who will take responsibility for different management tasks, as well as market feasibility. As different realistic options are developed, you will have a chance to review those and weigh in on them. A great strength of the project is its adjacency to Wells Park and the Johnny Tapia Community Center. So here we're looking at an aerial of the site with the community center here, Mountain Road, 5th Street, and 6th Street. If we were to combine the sites and potentially vacate Rosemont, we gain access to a 5.5 acre site instead of a 2.2 acre site. There are several existing resources on the campus, including a playground, splash pad, grassy area, a stage with electricity, and basketball courts. The next phase of the project will seek to develop proposed uses for the Walker property that complement, not duplicate, the existing uses at Wells Park. So we will be evaluating if some of the existing facilities at Wells Park are, if they're not seen as functional or successful right now, what the reasons for that might be and how this project can address those challenges. So finally here we see a very rough example of one of the tools, and this is just an example of a tool that we will use to move forward with evaluating different potential uses. I want to be very, very clear, what you see on the screen is not a proposed design. Again, we are nowhere near that in this process. This bubble diagram example is merely meant to show how our team in the city will start to look at the spatial and regulatory requirements for different combinations of uses and how it may be possible to modify the existing facilities to create better connections and functionality. So expect to see lots of these with different configurations and different uses in the coming months, where you'll have a chance to provide your input on the combination that that you think is the right way to go. So with that, I would like to open it up to your questions. Thank you very much.
All right, we just have our first question in now. For food trucks, is there a way to not have their noisy motors running and spewing gases?
Thank you, Terry. Great question. And, I think we can certainly provide the right type of power connection so that they don't have to have their generators running. And so that if that is a use that is something that is proposed for the site, the design process would be sure to include provision for that type of power source. Christina, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a good answer.
Okay.
Jeff is asking, says, thank you for all of this. What is the timeline for pop-up type events to begin?
Another great question. Thank you, Jeff. And the timing for the pop-up events is obviously going to be closely tied to what we can do in a safe fashion. And so we'll probably be looking sooner rather than later, as soon as we can gather in smaller groups again to see if there's opportunity for smaller events like the exercise classes, smaller groups of people doing activities, with the hope that by summertime we'll be able to gather in larger groups and have some of these larger events, and maybe something in the fall like an art festival that would be more akin to the larger gatherings that we've been used to in the past.
Okay. Here's a question about project updates. So you had mentioned how people can stay involved moving forward, but this is regarding receiving emails. So I'm assuming we will continue to receive updates about the project. If we have already received emails about this, is this correct? Thank you.
Sarita, thank you. Yeah, great, good question. Yes. If you have been receiving emails, you will continue to receive emails regarding project updates, and we will continue. The project website is going to remain live, and we will continue to update it. Like, for example, after this presentation tonight, if you wanted to check the website in the next couple of days, it's going to include all of the information that we've presented this evening, in addition to the meeting recording. And as the project moves into master planning, we will be using the website as a tool to communicate with everyone about what's happening, in addition to additional public meetings.
And we'll continue to take email addresses. So if you have friends or neighbors that haven't participated up until this point, there's still plenty of time for them to get on the list and, get information on the project. So, our goal is to keep the public process open throughout the entire project.
Yep. Thanks, Christina.
Okay, and Sarita has a follow-up question about safety on the site. What ideas, other than having the space being used for most of the day and having this expansive schedule, what other than that has been discussed to help with safety concerns?
Great question. And as I mentioned, in many of the conversations and in much of the feedback that we've heard from the community, we do understand, very valid concerns for safety and accessibility of the site, and the opportunity, for families and for youth to feel comfortable being there. And so, I think activating the space is a way that we program it and keep it safe with the number of people there. There are physical ways to address safety and security as well, such as fencing or video cameras, and those things have been brought up. But I think, again, discussing whether or not that's going to be the solution is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in terms of the process. And I think that those options are certainly on the table.
Other things that we'll be considering is lighting. And then also, as Amy had mentioned earlier, depending on the kind of development model that we have, that could provide other opportunities for security. So, if we have a nonprofit running the site, do they have people patrolling? Are they able to open and unlock gates? I think depending on what activities are on the site, I think that will also inform us as to what kind of security and oversight will be, on the property. But yeah, that'll all come as the discussion moves forward. Also looking at, what kind of surfaces are available, um, are the benches made so that people can easily sleep on them? Or, where are we putting bushes or shrubs? Like, can people hide behind them? So all of that will come as part of the design process, to make sure that, the space is comfortable, but also that we're keeping in mind, some of the problems that already exist on the existing site.
Thanks, Christina. Really great additional points. Good to note here too, there is another project that's addressing ADA accessibility and lighting more comprehensively in the Wells Park neighborhood. Because that study has shown that in many parts of the neighborhood, lighting needs to be addressed.
But I guess I also just want to say that, no solution is foolproof. And it really does take a combination. We could have the best designed property, but if no one's there to use it, it's still not going to be safe, and vice versa. So it's really a combination of things, having a place that's welcoming, having pride in the community and putting this investment in, the economic development piece, if you have more people using the property. But it's also going to take, um, people from the neighborhood, keeping eyes out, informing us in APD of issues. So it's really a partnership. And, part of what we're hoping to get out of these pop-ups is, increasing that partnership and communication between the city and the residents. It won't just be Parks and Recreation kind of managing this pop-up process. We're hoping to get cultural services, family and community services, and senior affairs also involved, so that, community members have a stronger tie to city departments and the services that we provide. And, hopefully we can help build those relationships stronger.
Great. This next question is from Peter Rice from Downtown Albuquerque News. The question is, how far would the $4 million go toward the development of the property? He says, safe to say the answer would depend on how the design goes. But can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. I think that's our short answer. And thank you, Peter, for your question. Certainly, how far 4 million would go is going to be dependent on the different uses that are decided on and how the property will be redeveloped. I would say that 4 million for a 2-acre, I guess we're looking at more 5.5 acre site, is a significant amount of investment from the city. And Christina, I'm going to let you elaborate on that a little bit more, just in terms of how that relates to other projects.
So for a project this size, $4 million is a pretty generous budget. We do have some upfront costs that we're going to have to deal with, like putting the electricity underground and some stuff like that. But if we're talking about buildings, $4 million doesn't go very far. So it really depends on where we go from here. And if it is some sort of commercial type property, that would probably need investment by the private sector. So a $4 million budget would probably need to be increased. But if it's mostly recreational uses, $4 million is pretty generous.
Thanks, Christina.
And that $4 million could also be used to improve the existing site. So, it probably wouldn't be an entire renovation, but we could, add some amenities or some safety measures to improve that property as well.
Okay. Back to the issue of safety and security related to homelessness in the area. Paul Chavez has a question or a comment about, he says, I've seen a lot of tents set up at Wells Park. His concern is this new park will just be an extension of more areas for the homeless to congregate. And he has seen ongoing security being an issue, for example, in Coronado Park.
Thank you, Paul. You know, I see the next couple of comments here in terms of folks not walking their dog because of the litter and the garbage. Residents in nearby businesses need to be and feel safe. If they do not feel safe, this park will not be used. And yes, we as part of this process, we have heard this comment and this concern over and over again, and I think we are taking it very seriously as we move forward with the process, because I think clearly we understand if the development of this property were to just be a grassy park like Roosevelt Park or Robinson Park, that creates a place where it is potentially more comfortable, you know, for encampments and for the kind of activity that we see in Wells Park right now. And so I think we really understand it as our you know, imperative moving forward with the process, that we come up with a solution or multiple solutions that create an active space that the community can go to and feel safe. And Christina, I'll let you add what you'd like to that.
Well, and you know, this is just one piece of the puzzle. So, you know, the city has multiple departments and services, and you know, we can provide a lovely park space. That's what my department does and what we're good at. And we can provide some programming for that park space, but we're not in the business of, you know, housing people. We're not in the business of security. Um, so we really have to, you know, work with our partners from other departments, and you know, other departments are working on those issues right now, looking at, you know, housing facilities for the homeless, um, addiction services. um, so you know, this is one piece of the puzzle. If we don't have quality spaces for people to recreate, we're not going to have a strong economy. If we don't have a strong economy, we can't support services for this population. So, you know, this is one piece of the puzzle. We want it to be a wonderful piece of the puzzle, and we want to make it as safe as possible. But, you know, it's going to take partnerships and work with other departments as well as the community. But, you know, we've seen through studies throughout the country that the more positive use you have in a space, the safer it's going to be. And so it's kind of the chicken and the egg. You know, if we create the space, people have to use it. If they don't use it, then, you know, you will continue to have these problems. So, you know, that's going to be the challenge, is to, one, create a space that, you know, is dynamic enough to get people there and to have the multiple uses. But also, you know, working with these other departments and making sure that, you know, we're all working together for the same goal.
Yeah, and then there's another comment about that from Gypsy Anne Marie about lights will be essential, need to be on late into the night and early morning. So yeah, we are taking lighting into consideration as well. Let's see, a question from Jeff about some of the graphics we showed. So can you share the initial diagram, understanding that it is just a start, so that stakeholders can use it to develop further feedback? And I think he might be referring to the bubble diagram, but maybe even having the existing diagram might be helpful for people to see. It's kind of like people can start to imagine what could be there.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Great question. And I think, you know, definitely, you know, looking at how we are evaluating the existing uses. I want to be careful about, you know, digging too much into this particular diagram. And I think what I want to let everyone know is that, again, you know, we'll be developing a lot more of these in the next month or so. And as we work with the city to develop, you know, these bubble diagrams that have sort of run the gauntlet through all of the constraints and are an actual, you know, proposed combination of uses and design that will work, we will be sharing those diagrams and those options with the neighborhood and with the public widely, whether that's, it'll probably be on the project website, it'll probably be through a public meeting, you know, and other avenues if appropriate.
Okay. And then Juliana Kerwin asks, this is about the Albuquerque Museum. Is there anyone from the Albuquerque Museum or Explorer who is participating in this visioning process? And she's hoping they will want to be involved in the planning and in the subsequent community projects that involve our local history.
Great question, Juliana. Thank you. Currently, we have not been engaged directly with the Albuquerque Museum or Explora, but we will definitely take this suggestion to heart and reach out to these folks, because that sounds like a great idea. And I think that, you know, that's sort of the beauty of the process moving forward too, is that, you know, it's possible. We want to bring in all of the right project partners and folks who should be involved with the process. So I think, you know, if folks see that there's organizations or people who should be involved who are not, like, we are all ears and want to make sure that we're reaching out to everyone we should be. So thank you. We'll work on that.
Okay. Sonia has a comment about when we played roller derby in the basketball court at Wells, we felt safe, but then we looked tall and scary on roller skates.
Well, and we've heard, you know, it sounds like there's a lot of use of the basketball courts, whether it's for basketball or roller derby or other uses. And, you know, again, I think when we're in a space where we're with other people and it's active, we're gonna feel safer. And so I think, you know, we're certainly looking at, you know, if there are combinations of these uses and thinking about basketball courts, maybe they're not used for basketball all day, but they could be used for roller derby during certain times, or pickleball or badminton, you know, and the more kind of uses that are layered in that space, the more likely it's going to be active throughout the day and provide that feeling of community and safety. Thank you, Sonia.
Another question from Terry. Are we still considering partnerships with private and nonprofits to keep activities there?
Absolutely. And I think that as I mentioned, you know, when we look at, you know, this sort of analysis and balance stage that we're in, you know, it's not just about looking at the constraints and running all of the great ideas through those constraints. It's about looking at, okay, here's this great idea. The city can't do that by themselves. So who are the partners? What are the partnerships that need to be in place to make something like that happen?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Sarita has a comment. She says, I really appreciate you all taking the safety concerns into account, as I believe they are paramount and key to making this work. I think Wells Park is such an interesting and amazing neighborhood culturally and historically. This property is at such an interesting crossroads area in the city. I love the idea so much of this helping with improving the economy and quality of life for this very interesting neighborhood and community. Thank you for this effort.
Thank you, Sarita. We appreciate that feedback.
And we're really excited for this project as well.
Yeah, a lot of really exciting potential. So I see a follow-up question from Sarita. What is the process of attracting business partners for this type of project? You know, one method would be, you know, to put a call out for interest. You know, and that's when we talk about the next steps. You know, issuing a request for proposals to developers. But we want that to happen, you know, again, sort of after this process happens, so that whatever development is proposed on the property is in line with the community vision. Christina, do you want to add anything to that?
And that'll take participation with the other departments like MRA, the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency. Um, if we're like talking about commercial uses, if we're talking about, you know, nonprofit uses like an art center or a community type center, that would probably be organized with Family and Community Services. So, at this point, it's looking at what people want and, what fits on the site and what kind of partnerships can we pull together, and then we'll be evaluating how we need to move forward with seeking out those opportunities.
Great, thanks, Christina.
And another piece of that too is, just because like let's say it's a coffee shop that we want, people are going to have to run their business models and see if that's actually feasible. So that's another thing that we have to look at. There's also been conversation about market space. But there are several other markets either starting or existing in the downtown area. So there might need to be some analysis on the capacity. Is there really the market for another market space in this area? So those are all things that are going to need to be considered. And we could put calls out for services. And if we don't get interest, then we'll have to reevaluate, how we progress forward. So some of it is dependent on the city, but some of it also is going to be dependent on the market and, what business people are willing to, take a risk on this kind of project. And it is something different for Albuquerque. So, we'll also have to see what kind of participation we get from the public sector, if that's a way we want to proceed, or private sector rather.
Great explanation. Thanks, Christina. We'll give a chance here if folks have additional questions or comments. And thank you, Kelly. Kelly just put the project website link back in the chat bar if folks have not had a chance to visit it. Please do so. And again, please note that the recording for this presentation will be posted, as well as the contents of the presentation on the actual site itself.
And I'd just like to give a shout out to the other city departments. We do have other city employees on the call this evening, people with planning, senior affairs, the council's office, and potentially the mayor's office. So thank you all for helping us through this process, and their continued participation is going to be key to making a successful project. Oh, and hi, Carol. I'm sorry I didn't see you. Thanks, Family and Community Services, for attending tonight too.
So it looks like we had a couple more comments, appreciating the process, agreement about lighting. And then from Terry, Site Santa Fe and 516 Arts, examples of places that bring in activities in the evenings. Hopefully you can reach out to those kinds of businesses that can envision something for this area. Great suggestion. Thank you, Terry. Great. Yeah, and I would echo that from Christina. It's been really cool to get to work with all the other different city departments, and I think that it's just a really great sign that collaboration is going to support whatever direction the project goes. It's a pretty cool thing.
Okay.
Comment from Juliana, let us know how we can help reach out to include a wider diversity of participants in this process. I think we definitely want to hear from you if if there are ways or activities or processes, methods of communicating that will help reach people that we may not have with this process, please. So we've got Christina's email is on the screen here, as well as a phone number. And I think, please reach out with ideas to help us do that. We are all ears. From Eileen, a general timeline or estimate. I think we do see that here in this graphic. I'm not sure, Eileen, if you had a chance to see this, but and this graphic shows the combination of things happening, whether it's the availability of funds in terms of the general obligation bond funds becoming available, the time that it takes to go through the master planning and design and construction process. And so, and I think, and these dates obviously out here in 2023, 2024 are not set in stone. A lot of this really hinges on funding being available. But I think, we can see that, a lot's going to be happening in the next 3 to 5 years.
So I think just a general timeline, during this next year, we'll be working on design with the hope that, 2022, when we have hopefully funding approved and available, that we'll be able to go to bid. So really the next year is going to be the design process. It will probably be, 3 to 6 months of the early schematic and master planning. And then, construction documents may go a little bit faster because we'll already have things pretty much set and it's more the technical things. But yeah, we plan to have this park, the design complete prior to the bonds being available in early 2022, so that we're ready for construction. So really we have a year for this design process. And it may be a little bit delayed if we do go public-private partnerships, just because, those agreements may take longer. We may get started on design later because, if we have an investor, they're going to want a stronger voice in the design process. But generally, our plan is to be in design over the next year and be ready for construction early 2022.
Okay, we do have more time for more comments and questions if folks want to share that with us.
And also, if you have ideas for things that you'd like us to try out during the next year, feel free to, put those on the website or to send us an email. We, as Amy said, we do want to, kind of see how the site functions and also get people excited for the upcoming project. So the more, involvement we can have in getting people on the site, the better.
Yep. Send us your ideas. If there's something your organization wants to do, just send us your ideas. Eileen has a question. Will there be any requests to the upcoming legislature? Christina?
I'm not sure about that, but I can double check on that. If we did put in a request, it would probably be for additional design funds, just because, we wouldn't be ready for construction till 2022. And with the state economy kind of being stressed right now, they're looking for projects that, can be accomplished in a shorter period of time. But we can evaluate that.
Give a couple more minutes if folks have additional comments or questions. appreciate the positive feedback from folks. We're really, excited about this process and honored to be involved.
And thank you for all of those people who have participated up until this point. Having 200 survey responses is pretty good for a city project. So we appreciate all your input, and we hope that, you see your feedback as we progress into the design phase. So I think with that, we can close the meeting. If you have further questions, feel free to email me or, post onto the website.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your interest and your feedback and your support. And we look forward to working with everyone as the project moves forward. So